Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Not D&D, which is brought to you by EN Live, part of EN World, the leading tabletop news and review site. I'm your host, Jessica, but much more excitingly with me this week, I have two fantastic guests. So, Tommaso, would you start, please, and introduce yourself?
Hi, Jess. Thank you for having us. I'm Tommaso de Benetti, the creative director at the Word Anvil Publishing. And our latest game is Broken Tales, and that's what we are discussing this evening, I think.
Yeah, definitely. That's good, because that's what I've prepared all my questions for. So I'm glad that's what you want to talk about. It's handy. and also we have Nick here with us as well. Could you introduce yourself?
Hey folks, my name is Nick, and I am the community manager for the World Anvil Publishing. I also do streams, mostly promoting this game. Sometimes I play with other people for other games as well. A lot of things. It's so hard to summarize it all.
Yeah, so you get to spend all day talking about this amazing game and playing games of it and showing people how it works.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Sounds like a pretty good job. So if you want to check out someone playing this game, if you check out your channel afterwards, maybe sounds like a good way to go to talk about Broken Tales.
So we have a few actual play on our YouTube channel of the Word Anvil Publishing. So there's several in a few languages. We have Italian, English, and French, actually.
Wow.
But then on Twitch, I think Nick is the expert, the Twitch expert. I'm too old for it. So
I mean, me too. Me too, but we're both here on it right now. So, how difficult can it be? How difficult can it be? But yeah, so we're going to hear talking about the game Broken Tales. But before we get into talking about that, I just want to say, and before to say to everyone, if you have any questions about Broken Tales, anything we're talking about, please pop it in the chat and we'll pop it up on the screen and answer your question for you. So feel free at any point. But before we get into talking about Broken Tales, I wanted to talk a bit about your background and history with role-playing games. So when did you start playing? And yeah, what was the first game you played? So Nick, what was the first role-playing game that you played?
As cliche as it was, my first games was D&D, of course, because it's kind of like it's the thing that's most widely known.
And when was that? Was that just last week?
Actually, it's I've known about D&D and some D&D and Call of Cthulhu. I know that I knew about those two games for a while, but I never really got to play until around 2019. Around the tail end of 2019. And then started with online games, not streamed yet. And then end of 2021 maybe, I think, or 2020, I met someone who told me, hey, why don't you check out this new game on Kickstarter? It's called Broken Tales.
I think it was beginning of 2021 probably, because that's when the game was on Kickstarter. Yeah.
And then it escalated from there, and now you do all this community management and everything like that.
Yep. I try to keep things in order, I think, or sometimes I even cause the chaos.
That's a very difficult job to do. So how did you end up being involved and working working on Broken Tales, from being a fan of it to working with them?
I actually missed the Kickstarter of Broken Tales. I wasn't able to back it the first time. And then this my friend was like, she said, hey, you missed the Kickstarter, but the backer kit is still up. You can still late pledge. And I was like, okay, fine. This is my chance. I'm gonna do it. And then I saw a link for a Discord community. And then I started meeting people, and this very interesting man who apparently is one of the founders of the publishing company that made or will publish Broken Tales, called Tommaso. And we started talking, discussing the game, and then I had a little idea, because I've been a fan of watching actual plays on Twitch. So I was like, hey, what if we can promote this to other Twitch streamers? So what if we can get a collaboration with one of them? And then that's where it all started.
Excellent. That's good. So Tommaso, when was your first role-playing game experience?
Right. This is a bit of a longer story. When I was a kid, I used to go to the mountains in the summer. We had some cottages in this kind of camping place, and there wasn't very much to do there. So with other kids, we were trying to figure out what to do. And one day, somebody sat me down to play Hero Quest, and I loved it. And then after a couple of days of Hero Quest, this guy told me, "Hey, if you love this, you're gonna love this other game." And then he took me, this little this mini cottage, and he said, "I can run this," and it was the red box of DnD. So I started with D&D as well, and from there I basically never stopped because every summer we were playing role play games together, but we were trying even different stuff. We didn't just have D&D. We had Call of Cthulhu, we had Vampire, we had Warhammer. We had one called Druid, which I don't think was translated into English. And then when I got a bit older, I was part of a RPG club in my city, so it was very easy to try different stuff. Then at some point I left for now I live in Finland. I left for Finland, and I've been living here for 15 years. So I had a bit of a gap in between, several years without a clear group to play with. It was a bit of a language barrier. Finnish is not the easiest language, and
I'll bet.
Not everybody was comfortable playing in English. After a while, I was nostalgic, so I started up again, being interested in role-play games, and of course, the advent of some tools like instant messengers and ways to play online together were a huge help in rekindling my passion.
And how did you go from being somebody who just like loves and plays, games a lot, to being somebody who makes them?
Yeah.
What was that journey like?
It's another long story. If you want to hear it, I'll tell it. I used to have a friend that, I still have a friend. He's not dead. He's still alive. I have a friend that writes scripts for movies, right? But getting a movie done, it's incredibly hard. So at some point, I saw that he was really frustrated because he wrote so many, and all of them were shelved for some reason or the other. So I said, "Listen, I want to make a role-play game. I have all these ideas of all the systems I want to put together. I think I can make something interesting, but I need somebody who takes care of the setting. Why don't you use your skills to write the setting?" And he was intrigued, and it seemed more feasible than making a movie. So we started collaborating, and we created our first two books. Actually, one is a generic system. It's called Monad System. Is our old system. And then he created this setting, which is called Nostalgia la Flotta Nomade. It hasn't been translated into English, but a little bit of it survives as in a abridged version in another game that was on Kickstarter last year, Not the End, from a group of friends, Fumble, GDR, because that is also a system that you can use for many settings. And in the book, they are they feature several settings, and they also featured this abridged version of our Nostalgia in there. So but we had to shrink it from 350 pages to 20. But that was the first thing we published on the Italian market. And before doing Broken Tales, we published, I think, 13 or 14 books or something like that. So we've been doing this for a while, since 2007, 2015, I think. Yeah.
Wow. Well, yeah, I love that story, because I always do think role-playing games are a way, it's storytelling, it's a way to tell a story. So someone who writes films and movies, I think the skill sets for creative, it's just another way to tell a story, isn't it? But role-playing games are more kind of collaborative and things
I
like
mean,
that?
there is a learning curve. There are things we found out during this process, because everybody who read that setting, which might not be dead, I'm just putting it out there. It might come back at some point. Everybody who read that was very amazed by how good it was. Actually, it's a science fiction odyssey. We call it nihilistic sci-fi for various reasons. But let's not go into that. Anyway,
okay.
One thing we found out is that the approach that you would have on a movie might work really well when you want to tell a story, but when you want to play a game, it can be a bit overwhelming, because we found out that a lot of people were so taken by the lore that they were a bit intimidated in putting it on, bringing it to the table, because they felt like, no, I need to know everything that is in this book. I think it's a bit of the same problem that some of the World of Darkness products have. Where there's so much material out there that people feel like, oh no, I know exactly what this vampire was doing.
It's a little intimidating.
Yeah, so, you feel like you have to study or something before you can sit down and play.
Exactly. And I think it might be also a bit of a problem to communicate to players when they just want to know what they're going to play, and then you have to tell them this story that is like 45 minutes long. So there are pros and cons in doing it that way, and I think since that time we found a better way to do it, where there's a lot more co-creation with the players, and Broken Tales is definitely one of this has this different approach where there's nothing really you need to learn before playing. A lot of the things happen at the table, and as a storyteller you can work a lot with the inputs that the players are giving you. Which wasn't true for some of our previous games, but there's a learning curve. This is what you learn when you try to do it for real.
Definitely. So we must talk about Broken Tales a bit, because that's where our journeys kind of led us with both of you there. So Nick, if you had to briefly describe to somebody, if they said, "Oh, what's Broken Tales? What's this game about?" How would you describe it?
Well, I would describe it as, if you take a bunch of fairy tales, or maybe the Grimm Brothers fairy tale book, and you smashed it with a role-playing game, you have Broken Tales. It's basically the game of Broken Tales is basically what would happen if you answer the question of what if your fairy tales are suddenly thrown into the real world, but in reverse.
So the good guys are the bad guys, and the bad guys are the good guys, sort of thing?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes. So
would you agree, Tommaso? Yeah.
More or less. First of all, Broken Tales is based not on the Disney version of the fairy tales, which have been sanitized very much. So we've been looking at the sources, and sometimes these fairy tales are pretty violent and pretty grim and scary, and there are things that definitely wouldn't fly right now.
Yeah, like the Little Mermaid one. I read the original one, and she just dies at the end and turns into sea foam.
Well, but even the Grimm brothers, even the Grimm brothers have revised their versions several times, because even at the time when they published it, people didn't accept how certain things. I just found out today that the first version of Rapunzel, they had to rewrite it because she got pregnant without being married, and they had to get that out. Or for example, in Snow White, the prince was actually carrying around the coffin of Snow White in every room he went for a long time, and that was completely creepy, and they had to cut that out because
let's not even talk about Sleeping Beauty, because that one is
Sleeping Beauty is another one.
Oh yeah, it is.
you might go and find out, but it's very messed up. Yeah,
I don't think it's safe to say it here on Twitch.
Okay. I'll take your word for it. People have access to the internet. So.
Anyway, we started from that, and we decided, okay, in the lore of the game, there is this child that saves the world of fairy tale. We don't go into details there; he just saves it. And the king of fairy tale says, "Okay, you have a wish now. What do you want?" and he has this wish that for once he wants the villains to be good as well and have their spotlight and become somebody people is excited about. And his wish is granted, but of course, every time you have a light, there needs to be also shadow. Otherwise, light doesn't exist. So what happens is that all the other characters in the fairy tale, they become twisted, and it doesn't mean an exact one-to-one reverse. So it's not that the good guys now are evil, but every other character except the villains, they're not what we remember from these fairy tales. And we use this kind of framework to take all the fairy tales, see what are their founding blocks of these fairy tales, and break them down and rebuild them. So you might, like in the book of in the core book, we have several scenarios that are based on famous fairy tales, but you don't know how they go, and you definitely don't know who's the bad guy, and you like they're supposed to surprise the players, and sometimes because we also suggest that maybe you shouldn't tell on which fairy tale this thing that you're playing is based. You have these situations where players find that, oh, I know which fairy tale this is now that I've been playing for 1 hour because I recognize that character. It's not like finally I understand what's going on here. It's a nice process of discovery during the game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I love the artwork style in the book. I'll put some of the pictures up on the screen here. So it all seems a bit like the tone you say. It's a bit dark and kind of creepy and almost like a little bit off. And the more you look at these pictures, you see kind of more things. Who did the art for these?
No, actually, I need to point this out. I'm basically the producer of this whole thing, and there is some of my material in the books, actually not in the core book, in the expansion, but the main author of the game is Alberto Tronchi, which is, at this point, I would say a popular Italian designer, and the person that takes care of all the graphic design and illustration, which I think is really top-notch in this game, is Daniel Comerci, which... at this point is also a designer, but he focuses mostly on graphic and illustration at this point. He is featured in other games like Cult, Shadowrun. He's in several of the Lordsmith products. Now I should go and check it. Like many of the games that these two guys have done together are illustrated by him. He's really a very versatile artist, can do many styles. And he's basically been working with us since the beginning because he was the first graphic designer we hired, and he's still our person of reference for this stuff because he's first of all, he's a great person to work with, and then he's so talented.
Well, yeah, I mean, definitely, I can see why it's the book, the art looks so beautiful in the game. Yes, I can see why you'd keep working with them for sure. So talking about the game a little bit more, so it's kind of got these kind of dark sort of themes in it. So what are the kind of stories that you'd be kind of telling? So Nick, I don't know if you have any kind of, story arcs or particular kind of favorite moments you'd pull out from the game.
Oh, favorite moment.
Perhaps in some of the games you've run that people can check out in the actual plays.
Okay, yeah, because it's the most interesting thing that's ever happened in one of the games that I ran. This happened. This happened during my run of Wonder Bedlam, which is a Alice in Wonderland inspired scenario.
Okay.
During the game, so we had the big bad wolf, Garu. Our big bad wolf got almost smushed by a gigantic caterpillar.
Okay.
For a series of very bad rolls. Like seriously, he was having such a difficult time. It was such a funny moment, especially knowing that he's the strongest hunter in the whole composition of that team.
Okay.
And he was the one who kept getting trampled on and kicked and injured because his rolls because he liked to risk a lot in his roles. He didn't like to use other methods of gaining his successes. So he was always like, okay, I believe in my dice, and you get a 1.
So that belief was misplaced.
Yeah, just for context, a 1 in Monad ecosystem is an automatic failure. Even if you roll 100 dice. As long as you get a 1, it's an automatic failure.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
Yeah, to be fair, in that scenario, the caterpillars are gigantic and they are flesh eating. So I think it's to put it in context, it wasn't.
To be fair, yes,
it's not just like a little one in the garden. That makes sense. But Tommaso, could you talk about we touched on the rules a little bit there, but actually, if we could go through the rule system. So if you could, so if people aren't familiar with the system at all, could you kind of talk through how it works in the game?
So I think the easiest way to explain it is that first we look at what a character sheets has there. So we start. Okay, first of all, let me explain this. The game comes with the core game comes with 14 pre-made characters that are based on these iconic fairy tale characters. We have, for example, we have Bluebeard. We have this Yukion, which is from Japanese folklore. Let me see. I have it here. We have Saint George. We have Krampus from Niklaus from Krampus is based on Krampus. Marina the Sea Explorer is based on the Sea Witch, which most of the people know as Ursula in the Little Mermaid.
Yes.
We have the Immortal, which is based on Koshchei, which is a very recurring figure in Russian folklore. The Woman from the Woods, which is the witch from Hansel and Gretel. We have the Babai the Judge is the boogeyman. We have Regina the Thief of Arts, which is Regina from is the queen from Alice in Wonderland. There's Baba Yaga, there's the Pied Piper, etc. So we made this for to be used at the table, because the idea of Broken Tales is that between one D&D, longer D&D campaign and the other, you can basically put this on the table, say, hey guys, we can play a few sessions of this just as a palate cleanser. Just look at these pictures, tell me who you want to do. And you have this great illustration on the front and everything you need to play in the back. So everything you need to play is there. That's the only thing basically players need to look at during the game. And we made them for you because these are such iconic characters from fairy tales that you probably would have gone and found them anyway. And because the process of breaking this character is a bit longer than a usual character sheet creation, we pre-made it for you. We have 14 characters in the core book, 13 in the expansion, and then there is the process where you can do your own, or even if you want. For example, we have one character called James the Swordman, that is basically Hook from Peter Pan. And in the book, we have an example where we break it in a different way. So it's the same character, but now it has different personality, different powers, etc. So you can do these things. Right. So what's on this character sheets? So you have, first of all, the name of the character. There's a little background where you can think about how this character has been broken and rebuilt. It means like it's not the character from the fairy tale. It is different. Some of the building blocks of the character have been flipped somehow. So, for example, one that I can use to make an example is the Bluebird. In the original story, is a murderer. He murders all his wives, as you probably know. And if you didn't, I'm sorry for the spoiler, but that's what
it's. I think we're out of spoiler territory. It's a pretty old story. I think you're safe.
Yeah. Plus, there is a great game about it. It's Bluebird's Bride. I would recommend it. It's a great game. Anyway, in this game, instead, what happens is that he's a problem solver, and he did have many wives, but all of them were killed by his enemies. So he's in search for revenge because how unfair life has been to him.
Yeah.
However, so the whole character sheets is based around this new concept, except one part that I will discuss in a moment. So when you look at the character sheet, you will see that there's one part called descriptors and one part called gifts. So the descriptors are sentences that describe something that the character can do well and something that the character cannot do very well. For example, one of his is I am an educated man who has studied the arts and sciences. I use this knowledge to uncover truths and reveal mysteries. This is the part that he does well. But then there is this other part. I hate secrets, but only when I don't know them. So we know about him that he will try to figure out a secret, even if it means getting in trouble. That is the part we call it the downside. When you bring it into play to put yourself in trouble, you will be able to mark XP for the character. So it is the player himself that decides when to bring troubles into the game, so he can get more XPs. Connected to these descriptors, there are gifts. Gifts are special abilities, pretty much, and they are the more mechanical part of the game. So every character has two descriptors like this, two gifts like this, and then there's one that is called Dark Ego. The Dark Ego is the connection to the original fairy tale. So in the case of Bluebird, is still the fact that deep down he's still a murderer. And if the condition is right, there is a thing called activator. If that condition verifies, he can bring back who he was in the original fairy tale. So in this case, he becomes this very violent assassin, pretty much.
Okay, yeah.
And of course, you can use it to your advantage when you have to fight somebody. But it is the dark part of the character, which still hasn't gone away. Right. So when it comes to the system, basically everything revolves around these concepts. And the main idea is that, first of all, if the storyteller determines that one of your descriptors covers the current situation, you might not even need to do any check of any kind. So this can change from character to character. Some character might be more able than others to pass a certain situation without a check. For some, instead, we might require a check. We call it a position check because it changes your narrative position in the scene. There is no situation in which your situation remains the same before you did the check. Like the story always moves forwards. Something always happens. Time passes. You get in more trouble. Things like that. So we call this position check because it changes your position. And when instead we need to determine if something has the possibility to go wrong, the storyteller tells you a thing we call opposition level. So the opposition level is basically a difficulty level. All enemies have one. And certain situations called threats also have one. So, for example, we have three standard values, 3, 5, and 7. This is the amount of successes you need to overcome the current situation. How do you get this success? So, first of all, you look at your descriptors. If you have one that can be helpful for the situation, you already get 3 base successes. And then, if none applies, then you just get 1 base success. Then what remains to determine is how do you fill the gap between the number of successes you have and this opposition level. So, to give you a clear example, if an opposition level, if the storyteller determines the opposition level for something is 5, you can look at your descriptor. Maybe you have something that applies, then you already have 3 points. You need to bridge that gap of 2 points between 3 and 5. Yeah. So how can you do that? You have 2 ways to do it. You can spend a resource that we call Soma points. but it is finite. So every character has a certain amount. It takes a long time to regenerate them, but every time you spend one, you get one automatic success. So if you have already 3 base successes, you need to get to 5. You can decide, okay, I spent 2 Soma points, and you basically pass that check, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or if you don't have Soma, or you don't want to spend it because it's also used to activate some of the powers, you can roll dice. Every time you roll a die, you know that you're bringing into the game the possibility for a failure, because every other result other than 1 is a success. But if you do even a single one, the whole action fails. And here there's a little complication, and this is what makes the system different from other games. Players are required to aim to a certain outcome before making this decision, rolling dice, etc. In most games, you first roll and then you determine what happens. Here we ask you, what kind of outcome would you like to obtain? Because there are 3 possible outcomes. If you just reach the opposition level, you get an outcome with a cost. And the outcome with a cost means that what you wanted to do happens, but also there is a complication.
Yeah.
If you get 1 more than the opposition level, you get exactly what you described. And if you get 2 more, not only what you described happens, but also you get a thing called an increment. And the increment can be something like you do the action faster, or something positive happens, or also you can spend this increment sometimes to activate some special section of your gift. For example, some gift can say, okay, if you have an extra increment, you can use it to inflict an additional wound, or things like that. So you're asked to think about how well you want to succeed in an action. And of course, you might think, okay, why don't I want always to succeed in the best possible way? Because sometimes it's risky to try to do it that way. And that's why, because you can decide how many dice you want to roll yourself. Of course, the more dice you roll, the more likely it is to get a 1, and then the whole action fails. Last
just
thing
like
is that these 2... Sorry.
No, I was just saying, just like in the example Nick said there, so that's why that person was failing so much, because they were relying so much on using the dice, and that meant the ones were crushed by caterpillar.
The last thing I want to add is that you can mix these 2 methods. So you can decide to spend 1 Soma and roll 1 dice just to try to make it a less bit risky, because you're rolling less dice. So it seems fairly complicated, but actually it's pretty easy once you try it once or twice.
Yeah, definitely. No, that makes sense.
It's actually harder. It's harder to explain than actually to try it.
I think most things are, aren't they, as well? It's like once you get playing, you're like, oh, no, I get it now. But that makes perfect sense. It seems like there's different play styles to suit different people. So you can play it more safer, or you can, if you want a more risky play and the risk of death from being crushed by a giant caterpillar, then, it seems like there's both options for you there. I have a question as well for somebody watching. John's asked to Tommaso, which were the easiest and the hardest hunters to break?
This is a very good question. Some characters are harder than others because when you try to flip them, they don't work that well anymore. I know that, for example, one that we left out because we couldn't figure it out properly is the Snow Queen. From well, I guess everybody knows it from Frozen at this point. But I remember talking with Alberto, and he didn't have a good idea on how she could be. However, one good thing about this whole Broken Tales business is that we have a great community. We created, well, first of all, we have a Discord server, which is very lively. So I invite everybody
Discord
to
and
look for it. Yeah. At some point, we also open a subreddit for 2 different purposes. Discord is more to chat and discuss the game. The subreddit is to submit your own creations. And somebody did actually break the Snow Queen, and it was a quite good character. So I mean, it's great to bounce ideas with the community, because sometimes there are good inputs that are coming and give us ideas as well. And I can say that actually we did figure out a way to break the Snow Queen. She's not included in any of the material that's out at the moment, but she might be in the future. So there is a little gimmick there that is quite intriguing.
Okay, and what were the easiest ones to break, or do you have any kind of favorite ones? The ones that you're like, well, obviously we're going to do that with this one here.
I need to think. This is more a question for Alberto because he did most of the work for breaking these characters. Easiest, I think maybe Baba Yaga was one of the easiest because she's known as this old witch, like from the Slavic folklore. And in this case, it was pretty obvious that we could make her interesting, for example, being a kid, which is the form she has in Broken Tales. And she's very frustrated about it. She's still an ancient witch. She's just trapped into this young body, and she really doesn't like it because people tend to disrespect her, and she usually gets quite pissed about it. So she was quite obvious to break in that way, but of course that's not the only way to break it, and that's the beauty of the system, because you can pick other core feature of the character and decide to focus on those. We focus, for example, on the fact that in the original story she is old, so maybe we could do her as a young witch. But of course you can focus on
flashbacks of Baba Yaga.
Nick, what are your kind of favorite characters that have been broken in the game?
Okay, so one of my favorites, of course, everyone who's known me in the community know that my favorite is actually Baba Yaga, because she gives a lot of room for different interpretations.
Okay.
Because I've had people who are downright manipulative using their innocence, and then there's just people who they lean into the horror aspect of the game. So they turn Baba Yaga into, let's just say, a combination of Annabelle and something else.
Okay.
Seriously, I have flashbacks of games that I've run where Baba Yaga has manifested just the creepiest illusions that a human mind can imagine.
Goodness. So this obviously is a kind of a horror game, so it's kind of creepy in that sense. So Nick, what sort of advice would you give to people who are looking to run this game and be the GM? What tips would you give to them to run Broken Tales?
For GMs, make sure that you use safety tools. Because this is a horror game, there are explicit details in the game that may be important for gameplay, but not necessarily something that your players would like. Because I know that there are some triggers we actually do have trigger warnings in each scenario of Broken Tales.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, that's something we discussed. Internally. None of this stuff existed when I started role playing, but over the years, I think these concepts have been developing a bit. So I think it's good to include it for people that need them. We, before every scenario that we have in the book, we have some keywords that indicate what kind of teams are touched by the scenario. And because, as I was mentioning, these are based on the original fairy tales, and some have to do with I don't know, cannibalism, or
very morbid.
There's a very famous one that has something to do with rape. So not everybody might love it, and we decided, like in the beginning, we were a bit like, okay, but if we put these keywords, people will spoil themselves what happens in the scenario. But then in the end, we decided it's better to put them, and every storyteller knows their group, and especially they should use it if they don't know their group. Because if you play at an event, this happened actually. You play at an event, you play a scenario that has some I don't know, it deals with suicide, I don't know, something like that. and then you find out that somebody on the table has a very bad personal experience with suicide. You don't want that to happen. So I prefer that there's a little bit of spoiler rather than having these situations where everybody's not having fun all of a sudden.
Yeah, definitely. I think safety mechanics are so important in games because everyone is there to have a good time and enjoy themselves. And there are some themes that people don't want to explore in games, and that's okay. So everyone can decide if that's a game they want to play. So I love that you brought up safety mechanics. That's really great to see in a horror game. Nick, what other kind of recommendations and tips would you give to GMs running a game of Broken Tales?
Let your players run wild. Because as a GM of Broken Tales, you're not actually in control of the game. The controllers of the game are the players and their actions. Just remember that every choice that your player makes has an equal consequence that only you know. So let them run their game the way they want to run it and react. Be a reactive GM instead of an active GM. Because in games of Broken Tales, you have your guidelines. Your guidelines are how you're gonna react because
oh, I think I just lost a bit of internet connection there.
Maybe Nick. I can pick up from there. Broken Tales might be different from other games because the characters are very powerful from the very beginning. Because they are based on these iconic characters, you might have people that can fly. Baba Yaga can do pretty much any spell she can think of. This is not like D&D where you have a list of spells. You just say what you want to do. And then the storyteller can tell you what's the cost of doing that, but you can do things. And you have, I don't know, Babai the judge can travel through shadows. If somebody calls his name, he can appear anywhere. So these are powers that tend to break railroaded adventures. And that's also why for most of the scenarios, we suggested to use this kind of sandbox approach where we give you an initial situation to investigate. We tell you a bit what's going on, and then we give you a bunch of characters, a bunch of locations, and we tell you what are the motivations of each character. What is each character trying to do? And how far will they go to get to where they need to be? In that way, according to the group of hunters that are playing the scenario, you might have very different outcomes. For example, there is one scenario involving a tower. If you have a character that can actually jump on a broom and fly, you might get to one part of the scenario very quickly. But if none of the hunters can do that, then they might have to be a lot more creative. And this doesn't break the scenarios, surprisingly, because in the beginning I wasn't sure that this would work, but actually works extremely well. And I've been seeing the same scenario go in very different ways according to who's playing it and what ideas they have and how they can exploit all the special gifts of the characters.
Excellent. I think, we've talked a little bit about kind of running the game with a group, and Nick there was talking about kind of being a GM, but I also noticed that the game has a solo mode in it as well. So could you talk a little bit about that and how that works?
Yes. So it's in the expansion, in the Broken Ones. It was actually added as a stretch goal because it was in such a demand that we decided to add it. And we had to think a bit about it because we have in our previous games that use the same system, we do have solo mode in at least 2 other games, so we knew how to do it. But the main issue here is that because this is based on fairy tales, we were trying to figure out, okay, what are you doing here? Are you telling yourself a fairy tale that you already know how it ends? So it was difficult to figure out how to do it. And in the end, from the original idea we had on the Kickstarter, we did make some changes. And the main idea now is that you are exploring something in the past of these characters that we give you with the books. So for each one of them, we give you some prompts, some ideas of what is actually your story about. And then it becomes this kind of creative writing exercise where you start to set up the scenario because you're trying to solve this prompt, and you need to go through a certain amount of scenes. In each scene, something that is related to some keywords needs to happen, and you're telling the story to yourself. But when you don't know what happens or you don't know how to proceed, we have this long list of possible situation and tables that will help you generate not random outcomes, but outcomes that nudge the story in the right direction. And I'm very proud of how it came out because I think it's excellent. And now we also opened a section on our Discord where people can play this specific mode with the input of the community. So it means that when you don't know how a scene proceeds, or for example, there's an NPC coming into the room, you can ask the community, okay, who is this NPC that just broke into my room? And then they will answer, and you pick the answer that you prefer, and then the story continues from there. So it is more like writing a story in a collaborative way, but it works pretty well, and I'm glad that we managed to put it in. Actually, for our previous game, which is a fantasy game based on Berserk, if you're familiar with the manga, the solo mode is the most downloaded file we have on the website. So people are enjoying that.
Yeah, I think solo tabletop RPGs are really a growing genre that I wasn't that aware of, and I'm learning more and more about them and seeing them in so many more indie games. I think it's a really interesting concept.
They do require a bit of effort. It's a bit like the solo mode in many board games. Like you need to set everything up and play alone, but still it can be very rewarding if you have the time and the patience to do it. And well, the good thing about this is that because it's some kind of diary, you don't need to play in one session. You can just play a bit by bit, day by day. So that's kind of a good thing about it.
Definitely. It's great that it has that kind of flexibility, that it can be both, which is great. We've talked a lot about the kind of communities you had, like the Discord groups. I'm assuming the links to all of these are on your website, theworldanvil.com.
Yeah, if they go there, they can find pretty much everything. They can find the pre-order for Broken Tales if they want. From this week, they will also find the PDF of the game because it's ready. They will find links to our Discord and article on things we're working on. I just want to point out that they need to put that article, theworldanvil.com, because worldanvil.com, some might be familiar with it. It's a word building platform. We have a similar name. We have a similar name. We were born more or less in the same years. I've been talking with the guys to make sure there wasn't any issue there, and they're very nice. So, but people, of course, it is a bit of an issue for search engine optimization. We have the article. We are technically publishing the Word Anvil publishing. So we have two URLs. If you go to the worldanvilpublishing.com, you also end up on our website.
Okay.
But the article makes the difference.
Okay, yeah, we I'll put the link in the chat there, and if you're listening on the podcast, I'll put the link in the show notes. So if you're worried about spelling it wrong, don't worry, just click on the link I've put there and it'll take you to the right place. So the products, are they available on, so if everyone's listened to this and they're like, do you know what, I'm sold, I will get a copy of this game, are they available to pre-order now, or the PDFs available next week, you said?
They are in print. The books are in print right now. They are at the printer.
Great.
There are longer queues, and then there is transportation and packaging, which takes a long time. But
of course, yeah.
So what we're looking at the moment, I just made an update on Kickstarter. I think we'll be able to send out the packages in September for Italy, probably late September, beginning of October for rest of Europe. And US, unfortunately, I think is going to go until the end of October because they need the book need to travel by sea, and just the trip takes up to 6 weeks. So I can't speed that up in any way. So it's going to take a while, but when you do the pre-order, you get the PDF for free. It's included, and you get it immediately. So you can start playing if you just want to read the game. It's going to take a bit longer to hold the book in your hand, but we're getting there, doing the best we can. It's a difficult
I
production
understand.
environment at the moment.
Yeah, I do all the logistics and operations at EM Publishing as well, so I understand exactly what you were saying. So no problem. But we have some backers here as well that are excited for their copies. So it sounds like everyone will have them well in time for Christmas. But many
I
months
think
before
so. If
as
something
well, so.
terrible doesn't happen, then you will have it, I'm sure.
Fingers crossed, touch wood, and everything like that. Okay, that's great. Well, thank you. Are there any questions about Broken Tales or about the game that you want to share with us? Any questions I didn't ask that you wish I had?
Well, there is something I can say that I found out during the game. Actually, it's been a hit with the LGBT community, which was surprising because, well, I have to say, like, everybody in the development team is straight as long as I know, and we didn't design it on purpose to be popular in that sense. Maybe Nick can interject here. I'm talking about the fact that it's been successful with the LGBT community. It was funny because at some point I had to ask to some people, like, okay, why everybody likes this? I'm not sure.
Why is this resonating?
Why it's resonating. And
I remember
it was funny because
getting that question.
I had somebody explain my own game to me, which was an interesting experience, and I think like the explanation there was that the villains in many of these stories, especially the Disney versions of them, are often represented as queer characters already. You think about Ursula, you think about Jafar. Many of them are weird, and I think this allowed a lot of people to I don't know, feel some kind of closeness to them. But I think Nick might want to say something here.
Yeah.
It's that feeling of, as Tommaso said, most of the time your stereotypical villains in fairy tales are weird, queer, and sometimes they almost represent downright drag queens in the case of
Love
The
it.
Little Mermaid. In a way, Broken Tales made it so that being queer, being weird, and being not the typical hero made it seem like, oh, it's possible for me to have this persona of myself. That, oh, finally someone is representing me, a queer person, as someone who's not bad. I can play a hero this time, which is great. It's that kind of sentiment, especially when I talked with some of the people in the community. They were like, "Yeah, there's a representation here." And the great thing about the hunters in Broken Tales is their genders and identities are suggestions. I've had people play Captain Hook as female, a non-binary Baba Yaga, even a female Garu.
Why not?
So it's very
I'm kind of happy that it turned out that way. Probably the art style helps. I think that if we did it on purpose, it wouldn't have worked because we wouldn't know what to do. So I'm glad that in a way, just the creative, like allowing both writers and illustrator to do whatever they wanted with this character, allowed the creativity to speak for itself, and then other people can read what they want into it. And I think probably novel writers get this all the time, with people interpreting the books in ways they didn't intend, but somehow resonate with them. And well, I'm just happy that it worked out, and people seem happy about it, and we didn't do any terrible mistake. that's
Yeah, well, it's great. It sounds like it's becoming a real collaboration with the community for people enjoying this game, which is always such a lovely thing to see. And I think you get that so much with indie tabletop games. I think, well, good to have you back as well, Nick, because we lost you a little bit there. We're coming up to the top of the hour, so I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to share about Broken Tales that you haven't had the chance to, or if there was a question you wish I'd asked you. I don't know if there's anything else.
At the moment, probably I can't think of anything at the moment. I'm a little
I put you
distracted
on
by
the
the
spot.
yeah, and also I'm a little distracted by the sudden fluctuations here. I think it's fine now.
Well, we got you on the stream now for the last 5 bit. So if you have any questions in the chat, now is your time to ask them. Otherwise, you'll have to go onto the website to the World Anvil and ask there later. But what I do now is I'm going to ask the question I ask all my guests, and I'm going to ask you for any recommendations of RPGs that aren't ones you've made and aren't D&D as well. So, Nick, what other RPGs would you recommend?
I would mostly, if I was getting asked to give a recommendation, I would point to games that are powered by the apocalypse.
Mm-hmm.
Very narrative focused games. In particular, the one that I really, really like is Monster Hearts 2. Now, that game is another game with some with real life themes that are, in a way, it can be played in a way that you can actually educate people about how it feels to be different, how it feels to not be part of the norm. It's a really good game.
So similar themes in a way that Broken Tales kind of has as well. Nice.
Yeah.
Tommaso, what RPGs would you recommend?
I have 2 if you give me the time. I have even
Of
the books
course.
here.
Yes.
Okay, so this one is a recent game. It's this one. You probably see it through the blur filter. It's Cartel from Magpie Games.
Mm-hmm.
It's a game that I don't hear discussed very much, but it's one of the best written games I've read, and it took them a long time to deliver this. But I think this is an example of that sometimes people need time to do a good job, and it's a game about basically, if you are familiar with Netflix Narcos, it's a game that allows you to play that kind of stories. Not only it's very clear, and this is a powered by apocalypse game. It's very clear. The rules are super thematic. They manage to adapt the system to work well with the archetypes they have, and it's also a game where the characters don't necessarily work together because they're all part of the same cartel, but they might have different interests, and sometimes they try to screw each other over. So it creates interesting dynamics. And I've been playing it with some people on our server, because we also play games from other creators, of course. And it was extremely funny to play. So this is one that I would recommend. I don't know why it's not more popular, but it should be, because it's excellent. And the other one is a big inspiration for me. Nobilis. This is okay. You cannot see it.
That I can see it now.
Okay, something like this.
Go.
This is it's a weird coffee. How do you call it? Coffee table book.
Yeah,
This kind of format.
Book,
So this is the second edition. There are 3 editions. The third edition went wrong for some reason. It's completely different. Basically, the best way to describe it is the unofficial RPG of the Sandman.
Oh wow!
It's amazing. Like, it's incredibly well written, a bit cryptic, super interesting system. Every character embodies one concept. It's hard to describe, but every character embodies one concept, and they do have some domain over that specific concept. And the concepts can be as weird as I don't know. I am the nobilis of metal bottles. So when there are metal bottles around, you can do a lot of things, and you have this kind of unlimited power. But then you're limited in all other aspects of life. And then, of course, you can pick some concepts that are more flexible than others. But if you like the Sandman from Neil Gaiman, this is the game. It's been such a inspiration for me growing up. It's quite old, and I don't know how easy it is to find this specific edition here. But I would recommend to follow the creator. At the moment, she's called Jenna Moran. She had a different name back then. She's still publishing games. The most recent one is called Glitch, which is a kind of a side game in the Nobilis universe. But yeah, Nobilis, it's amazing. So try to find it. They have the PDF on Drive to RPG. At least the PDF, you can get it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, those are some great recommendations. Thank you very much. And I always ask, because then it's ideas for people to contact to come on another episode of Not D&D. So I want to say thank you so much for coming on and giving up your time to talk to us about Broken Tales, even though it's like, midnight and 5 a.m. where you folks are. So thank you so much for giving up the time to come talk to us. Thank you so much to the guests and everyone that came along and watched and asked questions. We are back again next week with Not D&D. We're talking about Orbital Blues, which is a space western tabletop RPG. So slightly different vibe to what we're talking about today, just to keep it different. But yeah, so we're back next Monday. But for now, I think it's time to say goodbye. So Tommaso, Nick, thank you so much for giving it your time and coming on being guest this week.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
No problem. All right, we'll see you next week.
All right.